Comment, like, subscribe. The bell keeps you notified. It helps the show thrive. Musical instruments are quite possibly the peak of humanity. They are objects forged by humankind with little to no similarity to anything found in nature, and their sole purpose is to make a nice sound and in turn create joy and happiness. There are few things that we humans have created with primarily joy in mind. Since their inception, musical instruments have spread far and wide across the planet. Who hasn't at least attempted to play a musical instrument once in their life, whether that be harmlessly plucking a guitar, tinkering around on a piano, or just shaking a tambourine? Names of musical instruments have become some of the most uttered words on our planet, and they're some of the first words we learn about, along with the names of animals and names of colours in school at a young age. And while there are those classic instruments like the ones found in rock bands and orchestras that everyone knows about, there are some way niche instruments out there too. So today we're going to find out how some of the most beloved and more obscure instruments got their names. Though before we do that, we need to talk about the families of musical instruments. We love putting things in families, like how we clump certain kinds of animals or languages together due to similarities. We do this with instruments too. There are 5 main families that pretty much all instruments sit in. However, sometimes the families of instruments are not as clear cut as, say, the families of animals. Some instruments have a habit of sitting between 2 or more families. Like, I swear I remember being taught that piano is a string instrument, but now they apparently sit in their own family called the keyboard family. And xylophones are seen as keyboard percussion instruments because they have keys of different notes but are hit like a percussion instrument. Basically, if I say an instrument is of a certain family and you think it belongs to a different family, you are probably correct in your assumption. This is just a silly YouTube video. The last thing I'd want you to do is to be too stressed about it. We are going to be starting with the string family of musical instruments. They're called string instruments because the way in which music is created through them is with strings, unsurprisingly. Most stringed instruments take a similar shape, and their strings are either plucked or have a bow glide over them to create their sound. Undoubtedly, the most well-known stringed instrument is the guitar, and its many forms like the classical guitar and the electric guitar. This is a word that ultimately dates back to the ancient Greek stringed instrument of the kithara, which we don't know the etymology of, unfortunately. What we do know is that as this stringed instrument changed throughout history, so did its name, as the name got corrupted into guitar in English from the Old French guitar, which came from Spanish and Portuguese roots. This ancient Greek instrument of the kithara also became the basis of another stringed instrument in Asia, and its name got adapted into sitar, hence the similarity between the names of sitar and guitar. They're basically siblings in the instrument world. A type of guitar which tends to have fewer strings and make a lower sound is called a bass guitar, or just a bass. Bass is a word used throughout music to mean lower in pitch. You can have bass drums and bass singers as well as a bass guitar. The word simply comes from the Latin bassus, meaning low. Bass guitars were traditionally much larger in size, often being double the size of a regular guitar, hence why the bigger ones are called double basses. A banjo is a stringed instrument that has a body similar to a drum, and its name is not of clear origins. There's a much older stringed instrument called a bandor, and it's thought the name may be a corruption of this, as well as the mbanza instrument from Bantu-speaking parts of Africa. This African origin reflects the instrument's history with African American people. Former US President Thomas Jefferson recorded the instrument's name as the banja in the 18th century, and from there it became banjo as we know it. The ukulele is a much smaller stringed instrument and makes a much lighter sound. It is heavily linked with the US state of Hawaii, and the name is of Hawaiian origins, meaning leaping flea, as the rapid motion of fingers jumping over the frets and its light sound reminded people of a little flea jumping around. A banjo-lele is a hybrid of a banjo and a ukulele, as is its name. It was an instrument most famously played by one George Formby. One of the oldest stringed instruments, and perhaps the instrument most linked with the Middle Ages, is the lute. Despite being linked to medieval Europe, the name is actually Arabic in origins, coming from alud, meaning the wood, as these instruments were typically made of wood. The most well-known of stringed instrument that uses a bow instead of being plucked has to be the violin. Violins are small instruments, so the name is simply the diminutive of the word viola, a much larger kind of stringed instrument. Viola itself is thought to come from the Roman goddess of joy, Vitula. The violin is often referred to by another name, however, however, the fiddle. This name comes from unknown Germanic roots and created the verb of fiddle too. By and large, when used in classical music, this instrument is called a violin, and when used in country/bluegrass music, it is called a fiddle. The larger bass viola was initially in Italian called the violoncello, which was shortened however to just cello, which this instrument is more popularly known under to this day. Though one of the most unique stringed instruments is probably the harp. Unique because while it is stringed, it doesn't take the usual stringed instrument shape of circular body with neck and fret. As mentioned, I was under the impression that pianos and the like were part of the string family, but it seems they are now part of their own family dubbed the keyboard family. Dubbed this because most of these instruments take the shape of a long board covered with keys that you press to make sound. The most well known of keyboard instrument is of course the piano, and how that name came to be really could be a video unto itself, so here I will truncate the story just a tad. Before the piano we had the harpsichord, with its name coming from harp as already mentioned due to its strings, and corda, which also means strings. While an impressive instrument, the sound of each harpsichord key could not change depending on how long or how hard the key was pressed. This annoyed Italian Bartolomeo Cristofori, who created his own version of the harpsichord, which instead of plucking at strings, used little hammers to hit strings, which changed depending on how long and hard the keys were pressed. He dubbed this new instrument the clavicembalo con il piano e forte, which means harpsichord with soft and loud in Italian. While the instrument caught on, this mouthful of a name did not. It was shortened to piano et forte initially, and then just piano, which means soft, so the name simply means soft in Italian. Organ is a really strange word. In the world of music, it is most linked with the pipe organ, the piano-like instrument found in churches. Organ comes from the Greek organon, which means a tool for doing a specific task, and got applied to the instrument as it was an organ which had the task of making music through pipes. The word also got applied to body parts too, as they are tools of a specific task, though a lot more gooey. Other instruments have been dubbed organs too, like the mouth organ, aka harmonica, which we will cover in more detail in a moment. The woodwind family of instruments are ones that are blown through to make a sound, hence the wind in their name, and are traditionally made from wood. One of the most popular woodwinds is the flute and its many varieties. Its name comes from the Latin flare, meaning to blow. A smaller kind of flute instrument is called a piccolo. Piccolo is just an Italian word for small. It's a pretty fun sounding word too, I must admit. Though I have to also admit now that I have never watched or read any Dragon Ball. So if you're expecting some reference to that green dude the internet likes, then sorry to disappoint. However, another green dude the internet likes who I do know about is a certain hero of time who plays a different woodwind instrument, that being the ocarina. This instrument has the adorable name meaning of little goose, due to the shape of the instrument looking somewhat like a little goose. They make a much nicer sound than geese too, that's for sure. The clarinet is an instrument made popular by a very miserable squid, and its name means little bell, due to the fact that the opening of this instrument is shaped like a bell. The oboe is named after its rather high pitch, coming from the French hautbois, meaning high wood. A musical instrument kids across the world are taught from an early age is the recorder. This is a fairly odd name and does in fact come from the verb record. While we now link the verb record with videos or note-taking, it initially meant things like to repeat, recite, or rehearse, which it still somewhat does, and it's from these meanings as to where the instrument got its name, as the tunes created on the recorder were traditionally recorded into your memory. Despite their unique look and sound, bagpipes are still a woodwind instrument. They're one deeply linked with the nation of Scotland, and their name isn't too hard to figure out. The bagpipes are exactly that, a bunch of pipes held together with a bag. The brass family is somewhat similar to the woodwind family, I suppose. Brass instruments are by and large blown through to create their sound. However, instead of being constructed of wood like woodwind instruments, they're made of, well, you guessed it, brass. The trumpet is one of the most popular brass instruments, with its name believed to derive from the sound it makes. It's kind of strange that not more instruments have onomatopoeic names, considering their devices with their main aim being to create sound. The Greek word-forming element for sound, Phone, however, does appear in the names of multiple instruments, with the first we're mentioning being the saxophone. This is a brass instrument whose most famous player is probably a perpetually 8-year-old girl. While the phone part simply does mean sound, the saxo part comes from its creator, Belgian instrument maker Adolphe Sax. The trombone is a very unique brass instrument in the fact it is played by moving a mechanism up and down. The name is thought to simply be a Germanic corruption of trumpet, which was then anglicized, and the huge brass tuba is believed to relate to the word tube, as they are large tubes that make sound, though the simplest brass instrument is the one with the most interesting etymology, the bugle. This instrument makes just one pitch, and initially was not made of brass. The name comes from the Latin buculus, meaning young ox. This is because initially this instrument was made with the horns of a young ox. We now arrive at the last of the 5 main musical instrument families, percussion instruments. These are instruments that hit to make a sound and are some of the most ancient instruments in history. The most well-known of percussion instrument is the drum and its many varieties. Drum is an ancient word and is actually, like trumpet, thought to be imitative of the sound they make too. Drums are often found along with cymbals, another percussion instrument. Cymbal is believed to come from the Greek cymbir, meaning a bowl/drinking cup. I imagine due to their somewhat similar shapes. There's another type of drum called a tabor, and when this drum was made smaller, it was dubbed a tambourine, which is just a diminutive of tabor. The bongo is a type of drum of West African origins, and it's so ancient we don't know the exact origin of its name. We do know that it most likely derived from the Lokeli name for the instrument, the bongo. What's interesting is how the word bongo, often duplicated to bongo bongo, has been used. Many linguists use the term bongo bongo as a placeholder for a made-up language when explaining random things. Bongo bongo also has a less pleasant meaning in language, with the term bongo bongo land, which can be covered in another video another time. Glockenspiel is an incredibly German sounding name, and it is of course, unsurprisingly, of German origins. This is one of those instruments that sits somewhere between percussion and keyboard. The name means play of bells in German, as the keys make a similar sound to bells. The wooden version of this instrument has the almost alien sounding name of xylophone. We once again see that phone suffix meaning sound, but what about the former part of the name? Well, that too comes from the Greek xylon, meaning wood, as this instrument is made of wood. And the last percussion instrument I'm going to talk about has the most difficult of names to understand: the triangle. I've been looking at this one for ages and I just can't figure out why it has that name. These are the main 5 musical instrument families, but there are others too, most noticeably the 3-reed aerophone family. These are instruments that make sound by air being blown through a reed. The 2 most popular examples are the harmonica and the accordion. Harmonica simply comes from the word harmony, which deeply relates to music. The accordion has a name of similar meaning too, coming from accord, which kind of means to be in harmony too. However, in more recent years, well, in the grand scheme of things, people have turned to computers and modern technology to make music. These electrical instruments are becoming more and more common, with the synthesizer being the most well known, a piano-like instrument capable of making all kinds of different sounds. The name is simply the noun form of the verb synthesize, meaning to mimic something else, due to the instrument's ability to mimic others. The theremin is a very unique instrument, which creates sounds through frequencies in the air and is played by waving your arms around. The name comes from its creator, the Russian Leon Theremin. Then you have the stylophone, an instrument made more to be a toy for kids but gained traction as a legitimate instrument thanks to Bowie using it in Space Oddity. The stylo at the front of the name comes from the stylus used to play it. The phone is there once again for sound. But one of the most interesting modern electronic instruments, however, has to be the clarion, an instrument that can be played with any part of the body, including the eyes. It was created to be an instrument for disabled people to play, regardless of any disability they might have. The name seems to derive from a much older trumpet-like instrument of the same name that no one plays anymore. So it's cool to see the name being used once again for a much more accessible instrument. And finally, we have the kazoo, which is in a musical instrument family all of its own. Despite how loved this instrument is and how evocative its name is, we don't seem to know its ultimate origins. It seems that it may have just been a silly name created out of thin air to capture the spirit of this very silly instrument. Now, that was quite a long and impressive video I just made there. Not to blow my own trumpet or anything though. This video topic was suggested by Angela Fleerman over on my Patreon. Every Wednesday, I put up a video request post over on my Patreon for my awesome patrons to leave video ideas on. I then pick one of those ideas to be turned into a video the following Wednesday. So if you have a great idea for a Name Explain video and wish to enjoy Name Explain videos ad-free as well as get exclusive content, then why not support the channel on Patreon? It takes just $1 a month to help the channel in a huge way and gets you all of these amazing benefits. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, and the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos. $2 a month gets you all that, plus your name here with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.